Well, that's the weather in Denver for you. Snowy and crappy in the morning, and then beautiful to end the day. It's like they say around here, don't like the weather? Give it a minute, it'll change. Got the next couple days off and really gonna take some me time, you know? I'm gonna take a little of this free time and really play around in the kitchen. I'm gonna take a dish down to the studs and rebuild it from the ground up. That's fun. That's exciting stuff right there. Take something that's classic and make it yours. That's what cooking's all about, baby.
On this week's episode of As You Eat It, we are letting our creative juices flow. We are taking a classic French dish and putting our little spin on it to create something that pays tribute to one of my favorite cuisines, American Southern food. We're making what I'm calling redneck cassoulet. Cassoulet is traditionally layers of beans with confit and sausage, and it is delicious. We're going to take that basic concept, we're going to strip it all down to the studs, and we're going to rebuild it using American Southern flavors. It is going to be fantastic. To go along with it, we're making a chili lime cornbread that's going to go right alongside it in the bowl to really sop up all that delicious broth. And speaking of broth, I saved my chicken that I butchered last week, and we have another one that we're working with today. I'm going to use that to show you how to make a fantastic flavor-packed broth that's going to be the base for the entire dish. Check it out.
Preheat your oven to 500 degrees, and while that's heating, let's deal with our chicken. I have a 3-pound chicken here, and remember guys, just like last week, it's all about the angles. You want to go down and in at an angle along the breastbone to remove the breast and the wing, flip it over, then along the back to remove the leg quarter. Set those aside for later and add your chicken carcass, wing tips, and giblets to your roasting pan. Time to wash up, sanitize, and deal with our vegetables. We have 3 scrubbed carrots, roughly chopped, along with an Anaheim chili. Just gonna roughly chop that in half. In that goes, along with 3 ribs of celery that are trimmed and roughly chopped. Half an onion goes in. Keep the skin on, it's gonna give the broth a nice brown color. And 1 whole head of garlic. It's gonna go in. Go. A generous sprinkling of salt, followed by some freshly cracked black pepper and a can of tomato paste. It's gonna give us a great depth of flavor as well as a really deep, rich color. Followed by 3/4 cup of red wine and a generous drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. Toss to combine, and into our 500-degree oven it goes for 45 minutes. We want a nice deep roast on the vegetables and the bones. That's going to give you great flavor and color in this broth. Once everything's out, it's going to go into our stock pot here with enough cold water to cover it. We're going to bring this to a boil over medium-high, reduce it to a simmer, and let it go for 2.5 hours before straining and cooling. I'm using a spider for the large stuff and then a colander to get the little bits out of what's left of the stock. Let it cool on the counter, and then into the fridge it goes overnight.
While the stock is working, let's get to work on the confit portion of our cassoulet. Traditionally, it's duck. I'm working on a budget here, so we are going to use chicken leg quarters instead. Here's how you do it.
We're going to start by making a spice blend for our chicken legs, made out of kosher salt, dried thyme, red chili flake, roasted garlic powder, onion powder, freshly cracked black pepper, some cumin, chipotle chili powder, and light brown sugar, all to taste. We're gonna mix that all together and set that aside while we deal with our chicken. Our freshly butchered leg quarters go into a zip top bag along with our dry rub, and we're just gonna massage it in and really get them nice and evenly coated. Nice. Into the fridge they go overnight at a minimum. The next day, remove your chicken leg quarters from the fridge and put it in your square baking dish along with some roasting herbs. I have some fresh rosemary, fresh thyme, and some fresh parsley here, along with 4 cloves of peeled garlic and about 1.5 cups of canola oil. You just want it to cover the leg quarters. Little foil goes on top and then into a 250-degree oven. And we're gonna let our chicken slowly cook for about 2.5 hours until it's nice and luscious. We're gonna set it aside till it's cool. And then once cool, we're gonna remove the skin, setting that aside for later if you want. Then we're just gonna take the meat off of the bone and set that aside till we're ready.
Our confit and broth are in the fridge. It is time to deal with our dried beans. I'm using navy beans, but you can use Great Northern, you can use kidney beans, you can use whatever dried beans you have on hand. Here's how you do it.
We have our pound of navy beans here, and this is a super important step, guys. They're gonna go into a colander. We're gonna pick through them to make sure there are no inedible things in there like rocks. Then we're gonna give it a little rinse, get all that dirt off, give it a little shake, and then into the bowl they go, along with enough cold water to cover them. Pop the lid on, and then onto the back counter it goes overnight.
Our beans are soaked, our broth is ready. It is time to make the bean stew. Here's how you do it.
We're going to start by removing our broth from the fridge and then skimming the layer of fat that solidified overnight. Very nice. We're going to drain our beans, give them a shake and a rinse before chopping up 1 onion. Ends off, down the middle, and then planks, sticks, cubes. Then we're going to smash and chop 2 cloves of garlic. And we're ready to go. We're going to pop our stock pot on our burner here, add in our beans along with our onions and garlic, and our broth. We're going to bring this to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, and then we're going to let that cook for about 2 hours or until the beans are tender. You want to wait until the last possible second to season your beans because that will affect the tenderness. With about a half hour to go, we're going to roughly chop 1 bunch of Swiss chard with some of the stems still attached. Then we're going to stem and roughly chop 1 bunch of collard greens. Then we're going to open and drain 2 cans of diced tomatoes with green chilies. Those go in, followed by our greens. Nice and gently, we don't want to splash. And then give that a stir to combine. And we're gonna let that simmer until the greens are nice and wilted and the stems are tender, about 10 or 15 minutes. We're gonna give our beans a check to see if they're tender. And we're good. We're gonna set that aside till we're ready.
We are so close, guys. We have 2 more ingredients to prep, and then we can really get to building this cassoulet. We have to brown off some sausage and then make our crispy breadcrumb topping. Check it out.
We're gonna pop our 10-inch skillet on our burner here and fill it with about 1 inch of water. And we're gonna let that come up to a simmer on medium heat while we deal with our sausage. I have 6 jalapeno cheddar smoked sausages that are gonna go into our simmering water. We're gonna cover that up with some foil, and we're gonna let that cook for about 4 minutes before giving it a flip. And then covering it again and cooking for another 4 minutes. We're gonna remove them to a plate while we dump that water. Goes back on the burner. We're just gonna wipe that pan clean. Let the pan heat back up, and we're just going to dry blister the casings on our sausages. Give it a nice little turn, see where we are. Very nice. Nice little crust onto our plate here, and give it a slice. And we're ready to go. We're gonna wash that skillet. It's gonna go right back on over medium heat while we deal with our breadcrumb topping. First things first, a bag of pork rinds gets smashed up. You certainly can use a food processor, but I'm doing it a little rustic today, as you can see. Into the pan they go, followed by about 1.5 cups of panko breadcrumbs, just a little eyeball, followed by a generous dousing of extra virgin olive oil. We're just gonna stir that to combine and let our breadcrumbs toast up and get nice and nutty and golden brown, shaking the pan, stirring often. Process takes about 5 to 7 minutes.
You've waited patiently, and now it is time to be rewarded. We are layering up our cassoulet and getting it ready for the oven.
We have our baking dish here, and we are going to start the layering process with a layer of our cheddar jalapeno sausage, followed by a layer of our chicken confit, then a few generous scoops of our bean stew to cover that meat, and then we're going to repeat the process. Another layer of sausage, the rest of our chicken confit, kind of break up the bigger pieces along the way. And then cover that with our bean stew with those wonderful greens. And then we're gonna pop it in the fridge for about an hour just so the flavors can marry. While it's in the fridge, we're going to preheat our oven to 375 degrees, and we'll be ready to go in a second. Our breadcrumb and pork rind topping go on top. We're just gonna smooth it into a nice layer. And then into our oven it goes for about a half hour. Depending on your oven, you may need to turn this halfway through, but time and temperature, as always, will vary on your oven. Magic of the internet, half hour is up, and we are going to pull our cassoulet, but we're not done yet. We're gonna break up some of that topping and kind of move it around a little bit so we'll get even more crispy bits. And then back into the oven it goes for about another half an hour. Remember, if you need to, give it a spin halfway through.
While our cassoulet is in the oven, let's get to work on that chili lime cornbread.
For our dry mix, 3/4 cup of yellow cornmeal goes into our bowl here, followed by 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. Make sure you scoop and sweep them so they are nice and even. 1/4 cup of light brown sugar goes into the mix, followed by a generous pinch of kosher salt, followed by 2 teaspoons of baking powder. For our liquids, we have 1 cup of low-fat buttermilk, gonna give a nice tang to this. Gonna go right into our bowl here, followed by 1/4 cup of canola oil, but you certainly can use vegetable oil or whatever you have on hand. A few dashes of your favorite hot sauce, and 1 egg goes into the mix, and mix it all together to combine. If you're an over-mixer like me, you may need to have a little bit more buttermilk on standby. We have our pie plate here, and we're going to lubricate that with some cooking spray. Our cornbread mix goes in, and we're just gonna smooth that out so it's nice and even, so it'll cook evenly. And then we have our chili lime seasoning. We're just gonna go right on top of that, and don't be shy with it. And about 1/4 cup of frozen corn kernels, we're just gonna press those in, gonna give it a nice texture to the top. Into the oven it goes, and we're going to bake this at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. Time and temperature does vary, so definitely play around with this and see what works for you. Insert a paring knife, and if it comes out clean, you're good.
The cornbread is ready. The cassoulet is ready. It is time to plate, which means it's time to eat.
Our cassoulet goes down while we grab our stoneware bowl, and let's get to plating. 2 big, wonderful scoops of our cassoulet, making sure to get all those ingredients, especially some of that broth and that breadcrumb topping. Next up, we're gonna cut into our cornbread here and pop that right alongside our cassoulet. Garnish with some celery leaves. Nice. It's dinner time. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching the video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. As always, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram at TheChefZ, and while you're at it, give the Fade Route with DNZ a shot. We're available on all major podcast platforms, and we think you'll really like it. If you would like to be an executive producer of As You Eat It, follow the Patreon link. And as always, cook how you want to cook, eat how you want to eat, unwind how you want to unwind, eat as you eat.